Yes, guys, welcome back to SFeatleyTV, and we're back for another show of the Checker Flag Show. And we've got Adam back from DNF1 Podcast. How are you, mate?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Not too bad, thank you. It's a nice Friday evening, quite mild where I am, but yeah, it's good to be back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, if you haven't, go and check out the DNF1 Podcast. Their shows and their knowledge is brilliant. One of the best places to learn about the sport, most definitely. Yeah, should we get into it? Obviously, today's topic is we've got the British Grand Prix, not this weekend, next weekend. And Mercedes, though, we've known about how they're saying they're investing in next year's car, and that's their focus. And we've seen the dominance of Red Bull and Max Verstappen in the last 2 or 3 Grand Prix. I must say last two Grand Prix at Austria, they've definitely been dominant. And all of a sudden now that James Anderson has announced there are upgrades coming, including an engine upgrade for the British Grand Prix. So, yeah, Adam, I wanted to get your initial thoughts on that for starts.
Well, I mean, it's good news to hear, first of all, that Mercedes are bringing some upgrades to the British Grand Prix. I'm expecting this to be the final roll of the dice, if you like, from Mercedes in terms of improving the current car that they have before all of the priority, if it hasn't already, is switched to 2022. It seems that a lot of these parts that James Allison has referred to were parts that were sort of signed off and commissioned from the Baku Grand Prix last month. So, you know, stuff that's been going on in the works. This isn't like they've panicked and decided to invest money in an emergency to try and get some new parts out. This is stuff they've been planning to put on the car for a while, probably the last of any upgrades for this season. And as I said, we'll probably get more details, perhaps, of what it is exactly that's going on this car. In terms of it probably stuff to do with the floor. I'd imagine Red Bull recently brought a lot of new parts over the 2 Austrian races that we had recently, as much as 5 trucks worth that Mercedes was saying, which is quite a lot. And they brought a revised floor, obviously some amendments to the chassis and some new aero bits, which obviously has helped them a lot, including some parts for their own engine for reliability purposes, of course. And it seems that Mercedes are doing something similar by the sounds of it. The engine parts, I'd imagine, similar to Red Bull, it will be more about reliability improvements, of course, this season, because we only get one opportunity to improve the engines before they're frozen for the season. Teams are allowed to improve the engine if it's for reliability purposes only. And this scope is kind of sent out to all of the manufacturers, all of the engine manufacturers in particular, so that if there are any concerns that these parts are not necessarily just reliability, like there's a performance advantage to come from this, then of course they do have grounds to not necessarily veto, but raise concerns so that the FIA can investigate and determine whether or not that these new upgrades are to improve performance of the car. Although that being said, Red Bull, when they recently introduced some reliability upgrades, it allowed them to unlock more performance in the engine, not new performance, but performance that was already there that they couldn't use previously because it just was the reliability of the engine wasn't good enough for them to unlock that extra performance. So that's kind of what I think Mercedes are going to try to do. They've had some issues with the engine throughout the winter break. They said there were some reliability issues. So hopefully, for Mercedes' sake, these new parts that they're going to introduce, at least as far as the engine is concerned, will allow them to use some extra performance that they may, unbeknownst to us, have kept back out of fear that it could cause an engine blowout. And we don't get many parts in the season. So it's important for them to make sure that this delivers the desired outcome for them.
Obviously, I mean, I think a lot of Mercedes fans and Hamilton fans especially, I think as a Hamilton fan myself, I'm always that scope. If you give Hamilton an equal car to anyone else, I feel he has the capabilities of pulling it out the bag. And we've seen it on many occasions. Even, I think, 2018, I'd say. And I look back on it in 2018 at the start of it, and it just looked a bit... It felt I've always said it felt similar to that era where Ferrari all of a sudden made a step forward, and it took a lot of Hamilton's individual brilliance to be able to overcome what was completely probably Ferrari being a dominant car, a faster car. But it wasn't that far off. This, what I saw in Austria, in the steering Grand Prix and the Austrian Grand Prix, was that if we don't get an upgrade, we're not going to win anything. They're not going to get close, and because no matter what Hamilton tried to do, Max Verstappen had an answer for it, and Red Bull had an answer for it. So if you're always going to be about 5 or 6 seconds behind, no matter what you do, the car in front, even if you try an undercut, they've got that gap to be able to make the pit stop unless they make a complete hash of the pit stop completely. Which, so for Hamilton and Mercedes fans, this is a welcome sort of bit of news. But is it, as you say, is it going to be a massive leap in performance, or is it just going to be these little twerks that they said they're going to be doing every since which way part of the season? So I heard from obviously that our co-host Brevin John is a massive Red Bull fan, and I'm hoping he can get back to us during this podcast. But he said during like one of the reviews that what they brought to Austria was kind of what is kind of what their final roll of the dice, which is kind of they're like saying this is what we're putting on the car and that's it. You've got to beat this, and I'm hoping it's that so that the Mercedes can match it up, and then it'll be between the two of them. Because I think that's what we want to see. We want to see them try and be equal and see who's the better, who's going to come out on top, who's going to have the better race strategy, who's going to be just better on the day. So I think that's for the neutral. That's where everyone's hoping for with Mercedes in a minute.
Yeah, of course. The start of this season, we saw the first chapter, if you like, of a championship battle that seemed to, for everybody out there, that this was going to go on throughout the entire season. And the first couple of races, we obviously saw, the titanic battles that we had between Max and Lewis at different venues, different results, both of them having their successes and, of course, respective failures. It should be noted that, from the Spanish Grand Prix, everybody was saying, have Mercedes turned the screw on this championship? Are they starting to find that form, particularly in Lewis Hamilton's hands, that Red Bull just can't seem to match at the moment? Since then, of course, we went to Monaco and Baku. Street circuits notoriously tend to favour the Red Bull out of the two, just by nature of the chassis probably being a bit more impressive. Of course, the Red Bull seems to be a more nimble car with a shorter wheelbase than Mercedes. So it's always had that advantage. Of course, we didn't realise that it was going to be as much as it was in terms of the Golf, but Red Bull have been working away this season. I think they've had to improve the car as much as possible. They've always had a good car this season. It's just little bits they've had to do to improve it has really gone a long way to, putting them in the position where they are now. And I think Honda have done a fantastic job with the engine as well. And I think what's telling in this championship with Red Bull in particular is a lot of people have been saying to me that, the Honda power unit is now the best power unit on the grid. And I disagree with that statement purely because I don't think there's much between Mercedes and Honda, but I think the Mercedes engine still does seem to have a little bit more grunt than the Red Bull one. Of course, on electrical energy and conservation, the Mercedes one does tend to lag a little bit more than probably almost all of them. Even Ferrari and Renault probably have better in that area compared to Mercedes in terms of harvesting power, which is a problem for Lewis. Of course, he has experienced that turbo lag as well. But what impresses me with Red Bull is that we've gone to certain circuits this year. The French Grand Prix was a great example of this, and perhaps we saw this in Austria too.
That was a surprise to me. That was a surprise because obviously that's been the only other driver who's won that is Hamilton. Right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's been a dominant place for Hamilton. So I think at one stage of that Grand Prix, one stage of the Grand Prix where I thought, yeah, okay, right, try and outbeat us. We've got us into turn one. They jumped us in the pit stop with the undercut, but even then he was struggling to try and stay 1 second in front, and I thought sooner or later we're going to do him here easy. We're going to overtake him here, and then they preempted Budapest and what we did also in Spain, and did it themselves. And then I was like, oh my god, the laps. It's like watching the England game last night. The minutes are counting down. It's 1-1, and I'm like, score something or do something. Seriously.
Yeah, no, you're right. But I think what impressed me the most about them was there seems to be more scope on this car to, what Red Bull did that impressed me was that they ran a much lower downforce setting at the rear of the car. Of course, there's been much talk about the rear wing of the car at the Red Bull, Mercedes front wing, if you like, with the aero regulation. Obviously, things have been changed with technical directives throughout this season. But Red Bull have been able to take downforce off of this car to protect it from an onslaught from Hamilton and Mercedes when they're behind them, and of course make them more competitive when they're following. And the car still handles brilliantly, and it explains their qualifying pace as well, why they've been so good, particularly in the last 2 races in Austria. And it's something at the moment that, as best as Mercedes are trying, they just don't seem to be able to find that range that Red Bull has with their car, where they can turn up to different venues, perhaps see where they could be vulnerable, change the setup of the car just to mitigate those issues that they might have compared to their rivals. And it works a treat. That is going to be what is going to be important for Mercedes at a track like Silverstone, where I'm expecting Red Bull to try and do the same thing again. Can Mercedes improve the car enough with these upgrades to be able to not only have their own working range or increase that working range to fight Red Bull, but to be able to give Hamilton a chance in particular to beat Verstappen? Because I absolutely agree with you, Stephen, even still now, that Hamilton, if everybody's in the same car, I think Lewis will win. But it seems the way Verstappen has been driving this season, that margin between the two could be less than a tenth of a second, if that at all. And that just means it's going to be even harder for Mercedes to claw back that deficit to Verstappen in particular, who seems to be on a completely different level right now to anything he's ever done. So we'll have to wait and see. But so far, I've been very impressed with Red Bull and what they've done. And if Mercedes are going to find a way to close this gap with these upgrades, it's going to be huge. But that will be a tough task. But if anyone can do it, it's Mercedes and Hamilton in particular.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think this, like they said, this is going to be it was going to be their biggest battle in the turbo hybrid era, and since probably 2018 actually, and that was such on a knife edge, and it wasn't until Vettel's mistake in Germany they really just started to swing, and even then even after that you were like, was it really that moment? Because they still had a faster car, you'd think, yeah, that they'll come back and fight back at us. And whether it's also going to be interesting as well, because it's not just the fact we've got the Silverstone Grand Prix, it's that the new format is coming in to play as well. So we've got Saturday. So for anyone who hasn't obviously followed Formula One, usually you'd have the 3 practice sessions, the qualifying and your race. So the qualifying on a Saturday, race on a Sunday. Now there's the practice session, 1 practice session. Then there's I believe sprint qualifying after that. Then that sets the grid for, I think, the next race on Sunday, I believe. And then there's a practice session in between that as well. So I'll go for it just again. So I do remember it, but I just forget. I forget so easily. So
I think, as far as I remember, we're going to be having first free practice on Friday. Then we're going to be having qualifying for the sprint race. And that will take the same format as qualifying does on a normal Saturday with Q1, Q2, Q3. That will make up the order for the sprint race. Then we've got the sprint race itself on Saturday morning. And obviously the top 3 are going to score points in that race. Only 3 points are available for a win, 2 for second and 1 for third. The rest of the field, as you finish in the sprint race, that will determine the grid for Sunday's race. Then after that, we will have free practice 2, which will be for the race.
I've worked it out here.
And then then the race on Sunday.
Practice 1 is on the Friday at 2:00, 2:30 to 3:30. 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock on that evening is qualifying. So that's a very late time actually.
It is, but you got to remember for viewing figures, Stephen, that the audience in the UK, in particular, of course, where the race is going to be at, and for a lot of people in that area, and of course Europe as well. So it's a bit of a strange one for a trial, but yeah,
of course. And then you've got practice 2 the next day at 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Then there's the sprint race, which will then at 4:30 to 5:30. Then the race itself from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So the sprint qualifying on the Saturday, that will set the Grand Prix grid for the big race itself. So basically, for anyone that's not quite following this, there's 2 races. Sprint qualifying is basically a sprint race where they all have set on the grid from qualifying, and they all basically have one sprint race. I don't think there's any pit stops involved. And they basically first one to the line, and that order sets the grid up for the race, and they all get points relative to that. I don't know if the point scoring system's any different, but
no, it will just be the top 3 that scores points. So the winner will get 3 points, the second will get 2 points, and third will get 1. I think the reason why it's the way that it is because they obviously don't want this to affect the overall championship as much as possible, and the only main incentive of this is to try and get a better grid position, and this kind of creates its own tension for an event like this, because there have been a lot of cars this season that have been very, very good in qualifying and not necessarily reflected that pace in the race. Whereas in this format, of course, whilst those cars will have that advantage, it will create an incentive with a shorter race distance for drivers to try and compete with each other as best as they can. No tyre preservation if they can help it. No fuel preservation, just flat out racing for a third race distance, so about 100 kilometres. At a track like Silverstone, it's got all the makings for it to work. It really does. And I think the trial circuits that they're going to be going to, we obviously Monza is going to be another one.
Oh, Monza.
They're all circuits. Well, Brazil, if it happens, of course, we've got to bear that in mind. But it's all going to be the circuits that should make this format work. And of course, the real prize out of it is a good qualifying position on Sunday. So there is always that risk that, say, for example, Hamilton or Verstappen, if one of them have a collision with someone or they make a mistake and they have a crash, they'll be penalised twice because they'll lose out on an opportunity to get a few points in the sprint race, which could be vital because everyone's going for fastest lap. So every point's going to count this season. And then obviously they're going to end up with a bad grid position on Sunday, which is going to hurt them even more, especially if their rival wins the sprint race. So there's still a lot of play. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm more of a traditionalist F1 fan when it comes to this debate. I'm not a fan of the sprint races, but hey, any excuse to see some more racing on the calendar for this season is going to be a welcome one. So hopefully it provides entertainment, and I hope it doesn't affect the championship too much. That's all I can say. I don't want people to complain that this championship was affected because of the sprint races. But there's always the potential that could happen,
unless they lose by a point.
Well, this is, as I said, this is why everyone's going for fastest lap, Stephen, all the time. Yeah. And it could come down to a point here or there in a sprint race that could determine who wins this world championship.
I mean, it's so, and that's what we want to see. I mean, it's so close. I mean, as much as a Hamilton supporter, I wanted to see Hamilton win his championships, but nothing. It's like when you're watching that, the football on the I forgot what day it was now.
It was Wednesday. Yeah,
Wednesday, wasn't it? Yeah, so on Wednesday that it's been that tension of a decider. So you like a championship that to mean something all the way to the last race, rather than being we can all just go out and have fun at the last race, because it really doesn't really matter unless you're fighting for third, fourth, or fifth in the Constructors' Championship. So, obviously, I mean, clearly you want it to go down to the last race, and that's probably why Mercedes and I think every neutral's hoping that these upgrades they've planned are going to work at Silverstone. And I think in a mentality sort of way as well, Hamilton's dominated there for so long. I mean, he hasn't been undefeated since 2018. at Silverstone. He's won since 2014. He's won every Grand Prix apart from one there. So it's for him. It's mentality-wise. If he loses to Verstappen here, and Verstappen goes and wins this race, mentality-wise, that's going to be a massive, massive blow to Mercedes. And whether they recover from that, well, do you think they could recover from that if they lost this race?
Well, they're certainly not going to give up.
It must win for Hamilton.
I almost think for the last couple of races, and to some degree, they've been a must-win. It seems that the momentum has very much shifted into Verstappen's side of the garage, into Red Bull and Verstappen, and it's got to be said that at the moment that combination is like a freight train. They're literally just flying through, racing almost in their own race. Really, we saw in Austria, Max could take a second pit stop with ease without any concerns to still come out and finish a good 20 seconds ahead of everybody. It's just relentless what's going on, and Mercedes need to find an answer to this. Lewis, I'm pretty sure Lewis is doing the best job that he can. It was a bit unfortunate, obviously, the issues he had with his car in Austria. But, if Max isn't winning, he's coming second place. And I think that more than anything else is going to be the key. I think Max has only finished in the top two when he's finished this season. Only Lando Norris has finished in the points more often this season than Max has. But we're getting to the point now, Stephen, where Mercedes do need to try and find some momentum, get some form in, because we are starting to approach that sort of danger zone, if you like, where this could potentially swing Red Bull's way for the rest of the season. And we could start making predictions of when they're going to win the championship rather than if. And I don't think anybody really wants that. I think we want to see, it doesn't matter who wins to neutrals. They just, and a lot of F1 fans regarding that, whether you're partisan to Red Bull, Verstappen or Hamilton and Mercedes, we all want to see this go to the final race of the season. And I think it seemed it was going to go that way, but now, the focus has to be on Mercedes to find the improvements. I really hope they can, but these upgrades, whatever they do put to the car, is going to have to be pretty substantial. And I'm wondering if that's too big a mountain to climb at this point. We'll have to see, but let's be hopeful rather than optimistic, I think, is the best advice at this point.
Well, one good news is that coming out of Austria for Hamilton is that there's a new deal, 2-year deal with Mercedes. So he is going to go into the new regs for 2 seasons now. So I think one of the streams we're doing later, which is a new show about the drivers' market, is that we're seeing a straight fight between Bottas and Russell. And Russell, I think in Austria, he must have like the worst luck in the world. Like Saki didn't win the Grand Prix. Like Austria and Styria, both chances to finish in the points, and the car let him down. And it's like, it's not helpful. Like when the car does that, and talent's there, I think, to be just as good, if not better, than Bottas. And you can see Bottas. I get why everyone says why he should deserve an equal chance, but if you're finishing half a minute behind Hamilton, let alone Verstappen, then no wonder the team's going to favour more Hamilton for the championship rather than Bottas. And do you feel that because now they've got Perez in the mix and Perez is now up there scoring highly, that if next season, if they don't win this championship, they need someone like Russell to not just challenge Hamilton, but challenge the Red Bulls and be up there. So if he's not first or second, he's third or fourth, he's in that top 4. If Red Bull and Mercedes are going to be at the top in the next season, because obviously it's a completely new concept.
Yeah, I mean, Mercedes have a known entity in Bottas, and what goes well for him over the last 5 years is that he has done what he's needed to do to help Mercedes win the Constructors' Championship and, to a degree, help Hamilton win the Drivers' Championship. Granted, Bottas has never really made a serious dent into trying to beat Lewis in an out-and-out fight. There's always periods where, Bottas reinvents himself or claims he's Bottas 2.0 or whatever, who it may concern and all of that. But he's never been able to sustain a serious challenge. And that is the worry for Mercedes now, because Hamilton, despite the vegan diet, despite the fitness and everything else, he's not going to be around forever. He signed a new 2-year deal, which is fantastic news for Mercedes and also the sport as well. And I believe that's certainly Mercedes' top priority, was to make sure that Hamilton signed a new deal, which there was a sense of inevitability about it, but it's now done. So we don't have to worry. Will he sign a new deal beyond this one? Time will tell. I think this battle with Verstappen has really invigorated his love affair with Formula One. Even if it's not going well at the moment, I think he's a lot happier knowing that there is a fresh challenge there for him if he wants it, rather than just racking up records, which I'm pretty sure even Lewis probably gets bored of from time to time, in the same way that Schumacher did toward the end of his career. So, there's always that element when Mercedes know what they've got in Bottas. But the problem is now they have to be looking ahead. They have to look at the future. If Hamilton only gives us another 2 years at Mercedes, then that's fine. But Mercedes can't afford to waste the opportunity to bring in the potential heir to the throne, if you like, without benefiting from the experience and wisdom that Hamilton can give him. And as you mentioned, Stephen, give him a challenge perhaps as well. I'm not expecting George Russell, if he does get the nod to be Hamilton's teammate Mercedes next season, to just sit there and make the tea and be the intern for Lewis and wait for him to go. I'm expecting him to put in a serious fight against Lewis Hamilton, to the point where Mercedes will know that their future is very much safe in George Russell's hands. And I think that's what we all hope for as British F1 fans, that George can, in the right machinery, really throw his name into the mix in the same way that Lando Norris has at McLaren.
Absolutely. And you watch that race in Chequered and you can see both times that he should have won that Grand Prix quite clearly. I think in a sort of nice way, that the fact that it did give Perez probably a seat in Red Bull and in as such, which he fully deserved in the first place anyway. So you could argue that's a nice way to tell it. I think even if he did win that race, I still think that Mercedes would have kept Bottas for this season. I don't think that would have just, if he did win that race, it would have tipped it. So, because Toto Wolff came out afterwards, after the season finished, he said there's still things he needs to iron out if he wants to be at Mercedes. So the future's there. It's just developing further, and I think he's doing that as the season goes on. I think Williams also are getting better as well. The car is at least more competitive than it was. How he got it into the top 10 last in Austria was absolutely incredible. And if anyone can do it, it will definitely be it could definitely be Russell in the future once Hamilton's gone. And because, like you said, Hamilton's not going to be around forever. And but yeah, we'll move on. You go on to about the business end of the season. We're expecting to have this new revised Australian Grand Prix coming out with the new corners, and the same as Abu Dhabi's been redesigned. I think what was the other one that's been redesigned? I can't remember think of it now. I can't think of it, which the other one was been redesigned, but it'll come to me. But obviously, Abu Dhabi has well been redesigned as well. So you're sort of like, what would you rather, if they're trying to find a replacement for Australia? What would you be willing to go to? What would your favourite be to go to? Nürburgring?
European races are always at the forefront of the list when it comes to which races should step in. And I'm sure they always throw their hat in. Last season we were kind of forced because of COVID to have a predominantly European calendar, at least until the tail end of the season, which, a lot of fans will agree proved to be a resounding success despite the domination of Mercedes. there was a lot of action, a lot of excitement in those races, and I think that's helped to shape the calendar this year. We saw Imola become a permanent fixture on the calendar once again after its success last season. You had some great races at Mugello. Portimao was another race that got its spot on the calendar. The places like the Nürburgring and Hockenheim, I always think there should be a German Grand Prix on the F1 calendar regardless. It's one of the biggest draws in Formula One. It's the biggest attraction. You've got a few good drivers in the sport. You've got Sebastian Vettel in particular. It's got a rich history, and it's the biggest.
Michael Schumacher as well.
Absolutely, yeah, of course, and it's got the biggest F1 audience. Of every country that watches F1, the German fan base is the largest. So there should be a race there. The only issue I have with it though is that the weather is always going to be a problem. And last season, when a needs must, we just had to do it. I don't think the FIA are going to be looking to try and have races at colder climates at that time of the year. So I don't think they're going to be looking for a European venue to step in the same way that they use Turkey, although Turkey, again, it's bordering Europe and Asia. So even then, it's appropriate for that time of the year. So there are a few tracks that have been earmarked as a potential replacement for Australia, a double header potentially at the Circuit of Americas in Texas, USA. It's around about that same sort of time, and I think they'd like to have a double header there, which is a popular one, and I think Liberty Media would be very much akin to having a second race there. You've also got possibly a race over at just trying to fit the other venue. It's just top of my head now. I had it, and then I just got a notification on my PC that completely distracted me. I'm trying to think of another race where it was meant to go. Well, actually, you know what? I'll skip ahead to where I would like to go back to, and that is Malaysia. I think Sepang would be. Yeah. I think Sepang would be a popular choice for the fans, and I think the fans are going to be hopeful of a race there this season, purely and simply because there are going to be a few more races that are going to be subject to the potential being cancelled because of COVID. The Brazilian Grand Prix one we've already mentioned, Stephen. That's a race I'm very surprised if that goes ahead. It's one of the worst countries, if not the worst, at handling COVID. It's really struggling. So I don't think we're going to have a race there this season. Japan, a bit on the edge, Suzuka, but I think with the Honda influence and the fan base there and everything else, Yuki Tsunoda as well being a driver, I think we're going to push that one through. But there's a lot of good places to go. Sakir as well. We could go back there for the layout that we had last season. That was successful. We go back to Bahrain. That has been successful. So a lot of options. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one or two races drop out towards the end of the season. But I just can't see any more European races being added.
No, I can't see any more. The problem is the you see with the funding you get with the German Grand Prix as well. I mean, I think the last German Grand Prix I've had, apart from maybe the Nürburgring last season, obviously with the revised calendar, the actual an official one stepped in. That was Hockenheim. That was sponsored by actual Mercedes. Mercedes themselves paid for the race in 2019 in Germany. There's Sepang is definitely one that is one I would love to go to. I mean, it is an awesome race. The weather's unpredictable. Shall we say that? Let's just say if it rains, it doesn't rain, it pours. I think that still holds the last Grand Prix to be stopped halfway through because of the weather. So, Mr. Kimmy and his favourite ice cream. But yeah, I mean, I don't see, like you said, and towards the end of the season as well, you're looking at towards the end of the season, looking at October, November time, European races, they're getting colder, and you can see they, like during end of last season, the European races, they were struggling with tyre temps and everything like that, and probably that's where Mercedes had an advantage with their DAS system. You can see the Nürburgring and the safety car, for example, where the DAS system worked like even better, and then Max Verstappen was struggling to restart behind Hamilton. So I don't see any more European races being added to the calendar this season. But Yeah. So, do you think we'll have 23 races in the end, or do you think they just end up cancelling a couple?
I'll be very, very surprised. I would say if I was to bet on how many races there'd be, I think there's going to be at least 20. That's the target number. Don't be surprised if we end up having a gap in the calendar where Australia was meant to be and they decide not to replace it. Um, you know, the guys and gals at F1 and everyone involved in what we did last season and obviously what's going on this season have done an incredible job. We've had 26 races in the last calendar year, and that's a monumental effort. And of course, it's going to take its toll. And there's always been the debate over how many races we should be having on an F1 season. Of course, logistically trying to make that transition as easy as possible from one continent to another. So I'm expecting at least 20, but I would probably say optimistically probably around 21 at the most. We might get 22, but as I said, I think we're going to lose Brazil. Japan, I think, will be fine. Mexico should be okay. So we could end up with 21 races this year, but that's not a bad thing. That's a pretty full season. And as disappointed as I am that we're not going to be going to Melbourne for the second year in a row, hopefully by the time we go there, perhaps at the beginning of next season, of course, perhaps Melbourne will be a curtain raiser as it used to be. We'll be able to see a very good race. And of course, mostly for the Australian fans who are probably dying to see Danny Ricciardo in the McLaren. Hopefully, by the time we go back there, he should be on top of the new car by then. So certainly will be a sight to see, but it's just a shame we're not going to be going there.
Yeah. One thing I would like to mention is about obviously we knew Carlos Reutemann was in hospital, very ill, and unfortunately on the 7th year, he's passed away at an age of he was 78 in the end.
79, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously just a few words about him. Obviously, the first mention I remember of him is when he was trying to step in for Lauda. Back in 1976, and yeah, I wouldn't say he's probably just like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe one of the absolute like greats of the sport, but a great racer in a sense. Just a few words about Reutemann in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge loss for the sport. Carlos Reutemann, very much a prolific figure in the early 80s. Obviously, 1981 runner-up in the championship. Arguably should have won that championship if it wasn't for the injuries he sustained halfway through the season. So it was just such a shame for him. I remember famously, I think it was Enzo Ferrari, I think, visited him in hospital, I believe, and left a trophy on his desk that said, the real 1981 world champion. But as I said, Carlos, great driver, will be missed by many. And, if for anyone that obviously hadn't seen any of the races from F1's archives with Carlos Reutemann, definitely check it out. 12 times a Grand Prix winner, one of the best drivers to never win a world championship, and was loved and a champion to a lot of us that followed the sport. So yeah, be very much dearly missed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, he had 146 entries, raced for Brabham, Ferrari, Lotus, Williams over 10 years, and 12 wins, 45 podiums. And I think his last win was 1981 in Belgium. Last entry was then a year later in with the Brazilian Grand Prix, and he will be missed by a lot of people around the paddock, and so it is. But as we say, the sport moves on, and Gasly's always causing up a stir in the drivers' market. I mean, I've got I'll big up Reverend John, by the way. He's greetings. You are welcome, Adam. So I can join the stream. Tied up with a workload today. No worries, man. We'll get you on some other time. Don't worry about that. I just wind him up about Red Bull all the time.
Well, imagine it being in a pretty positive mood at the moment, probably loving life at the moment as far as Red Bull.
I think I've gone to the point of mentioning that you got beaten by your sister team to your first win. So
That is true. That is true. Yeah,
it'll be 13 championships to 5. So shush. And then the Mercedes camp to Red Bull's camp. So I think.
Oh, are we including all the drivers?
Including all the drivers. If their drivers' championships, Mercedes have won 12, and their constructors they've won 7, because obviously they left before the sport. They left before the sport started.
Yeah, no, that's right. I wasn't. Oh, so you're including that? Right. I'm with you now. Sorry, I wasn't quite 100% sure what you meant there. But no, that's fair enough. You need to give him some time to catch up. I'm sure you know.
I'll give him this season. He's worked hard for 7 years to get here. So.
Well, a lot of teams have. It's amazing that someone's had a good go at it. But yeah, here we are.
Yeah, but then to be honest, like you say, it's fair play to him, and like. It's like I said, Hamilton's already come out and said he's just one DNF away, and he's just one DNF away in the title fight. But with the reliability that there is these days, right, it's just it's so difficult to predict when he would actually be when he will actually have a DNF again. Because the reliability, unless there's a massive shunt, is incredible, and it has to be because of all these, the limits they have on all these limits they have on engines and parts and everything like that. Just wanted to mention about the penalties in the last Grand Prix, and I wanted to know what you made of them. And before I ask, just as Christian once said, if we can beat Mercedes here in French Grand Prix, we can beat them anywhere. Bring on Silverstone. Bring on your Mercedes upgrades. They won't help you, Steve. Yeah, like I said, keep trying to catch us up.
If anybody's got any questions, do feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer any if you've got any for us. Obviously, do keep it related to Formula One, by the way. I'm seeing a mixture in the comments. Some are football fans and some F1 fans in there. So, unless it's
yeah, I think he's. I think one of them's gone now. But yeah, like you said, your thoughts on the instances with Norris, Perez, and Co. What did you made of them? Because there's obviously been a lot of sort of outrage with it, especially with Norris, and I'd like to say there were racing incidents myself, but
I think what's unique about Austria, unlike a lot of the circuits that we go to, is a lot of places we have runoff areas where you can go very, very hard in terms of racing with each other, to the point where one of you going for a move like Perez did around the outside of turn 4 could go off into a runoff area and be able to carry on and keep going. I think as it could have gone either way, these penalties. I mean, I can break them down bit by one. With the Norris penalty, I'm going to lean to say that, as hard as it might sound, I think the stewards were probably correct. And the reason why I say that, as I said already, with the runoff areas, it's about situational awareness. And, people were sort of saying, was Perez alongside Lando enough? I think he was ahead going into the braking zone. So I think he certainly has the right to take that corner, with Lando giving him enough space to try and take the corner. Under braking, you see Lando moving slightly ahead. But even then, Perez is still there. It's not like Perez is completely gone. And for me, in that situation, people saying, oh, well, if Perez is around the outside, he's got to accept that there's the risk. Yeah, I get that. But you still should leave enough room on the outside for both cars to go there. It is possible to do. And because there's gravel around the outside, Lando needs to take that into consideration with his braking. And unfortunately, the McLaren does understeer a little bit on the exit, and that forces Perez widen into the gravel. Now, I think if it was a runoff area, Perez just went wide on the road and carried on, it would have been absolutely fine. But because it affected Perez because of the gravel in that circumstance, there was nothing he could do in that situation. I think a 5-second time penalty was borderline fair. I think if they didn't give him a penalty, I think it probably, people would say, for a different reason, they might say, oh, it's not fair, what he did to Perez. And it's the same thing. When Perez and Leclerc went into turn 4 together, that was even more a stonewall penalty because Perez, based on the precedent we've already seen with Lando, it was going to be a penalty anyway, but Perez went into Leclerc twice to knock him off a bit. So that was obviously a penalty. I actually
see with the steering lock,
absolutely.
Norris, I think I'm on with I remember Austria at the start of last season and where Albon was hit by Hamilton, and I always argued with rival fans. This is like, okay, you can give him a penalty for it, but like if you look at the steering lock, it's not like he's just gone, oh yeah, I'm going to turn into you now. Like it's not like done a Rosberg in 2016 and just I'm not going to turn until like you hit me and then I'm going to turn. Like he's actually got full steering lock, and what's happened is because of the worn of the tires, it's understeered him into Albon, who's obviously got the better grip. So it's not like he actually just bumped him off the road knowing he's lost the position because Albon was about to go through. So in a sense, looking back at it, I'd like to have said that if in the end of it, I'd like to have said that this one, could you just accept that it would have just been like hard racing? Because I think like most fans would want to see good, fair, honest racing, and that could have been second for Norris in the end. But
well, I mean, it would have been,
it would have been, and so.
I think the argument is how it impedes the driver's race, and I think the Hamilton example is a good example. But I think the caveat as a response would be, well, Lewis, knowing that he's got worn tyres and everything else compared to a guy who's got much fresher tyres around the outside, probably should have gone into the corner a bit more slowly. I know that's hard to say in the circumstances, but that would be the rebuttal saying, well, you've gone into the corner too fast. Clearly, you were not going to be able to make that line. And it's the same line with Lando Norris, despite it being very early in the race. People were saying, oh, should we take into account the fact that it was the first lap after the safety car? And I said, well, to a degree, but I think in Austria, up to around turn 3, perhaps turn 4 at a push, you can give some sort of leniency. But because of how far wide Perez was forcing off the road, I think you just had to say, look, it's harsh. And I know we want fair racing, but I think hard, fair racing in Formula One always means as hard as you possibly can, where both cars are still able to continue on the road to a degree, but no contact. And I think that's important. I was on an American podcast the other day, Outlap F1 podcast, really great bunch of guys and gals. They're really good stuff. Really enjoyed being on there.
Been meaning to try and get
yeah. And I think it was Andy who said to me that, rubbing is racing. I said, well, yeah, I get that. And, I love the phrase, but that's more appropriate to stock cars and NASCAR in particular, not Formula One. And it's very much a non-contact sport. And I think they have to hold that mantra when they make these decisions. So it is harsh.
I get that more with touring cars, for example. Like,
exactly.
And I want to see that kind of racing. I've watched the rest of that. There's no F1. It's usually in between the weeks. F1's not on, and I'm like, yeah, okay, we get to see some cars. Like if you're going around the outside, bang, get out of the way.
Exactly, and that's fine. But that's fine because that's how it goes there. They've got, the cars are built to withstand that. F1 cars are a lot more fragile in that regard in handling that. But at the same time, as I said, Russell and Alonso had the same incident to a degree, but they managed to, both of them, respect the boundaries of each other, and both of them were able to race wheel to wheel. Raikkonen and Alonso also had the same thing in the same race where they were together.
That accident was very weird.
That one, I think Kimi just didn't see Seb, and he's caught him. It's just a bit laziness, really, and that's it. Probably for whatever reason, a silly mistake. But the Perez Leclerc, the second one at turn 6, I actually don't think that was a penalty. I think that was a bit harsh because Leclerc starts to make an overtake on Perez late into the corner, halfway through the apex, and I think Leclerc probably put too much risk into that move. And I think, the only reason Perez got a penalty, I think just because of the precedent they'd already set. And also the fact that he lost a little bit of control halfway through the apex where the car stepped out a little bit. And obviously you'd say, well, if that didn't happen, then both cars would have made the corner. But I thought that one was a little harsh. But I would say it was never, the FIA were never going to come out popular after this one. And I think a lot of people were angry because of how it affected Lando. But to be honest with you, I probably would have given a 5-second time penalty if I was in the steward's box, if you like, or reviewing that decision. And it took him 16 laps to make that decision. So it certainly wasn't going to be an easy one. They were probably dwelling on it for a while.
Just before I get to the question, big up members, Talk Menu, Maisie, Connor, I keep forgetting now. Bargav, Menina, King Tony as well. Mate, if you want to join a membership, hit the join button below. Plus, you got the link to DNF1 Podcast down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for them, because they need their numbers up. Get their numbers up. Honestly, best quality content if you want to learn about F1. Your take on the license penalty point system by F1 with Lando Norris on the verge of getting a ban with one more penalty. And also, it's not worrying that with Perez erratic driving, he has no penalty whatsoever. So I'm all right with it because Hamilton's gone down that has gone down 4 points this week. So good.
Well, I'm glad Breffen has brought this up because this is something that I found really strange as well. Yeah. In a word, seriously, or in a phrase, it's serious need for review. It really does. We saw
Mazepin's got no penalties on that.
Well, no, Mazepin. I wouldn't have even brought Mazepin into this argument with the penalty points. I really wouldn't. Although I can understand what the thinking.
Mazepin, actually, sorry.
Yeah, no, Mazepin. Yeah, I can understand the thinking behind that. But no, I think the penalty system does need review, or penalty point system, I should say, because a super license has, you're allowed to get 12 penalty points before you receive a race ban.
I'm just thinking of Gunther Steiner's gift to Mazepin.
Oh, what, the spinning top? Yeah, it was quite funny.
When you're shitting it. You can tell when you're shit. Just now you can stop spinning the car.
No, it's fine. But yeah, with the penalty point system, I find really baffling. I'll give you a simple example. The penalty point system was designed to obviously improve safety in the sport and driving standards, which of course will be upheld on a regular road by comparison. Of course, we're not going to be driving Formula One cars on a regular road, but the logic is the same. And one example of this was Lando's penalty that he got against Perez. He got 3 penalty points for it. Now, that's ridiculously insane. That is really harsh to get 3. A 5-second time penalty was harsh enough. I thought 3 penalty points was insane. In theory, if Lando did that 3 more times, even in one race, that's 12 penalty points. That's a race ban. And for that's ridiculous. You would not ban someone for doing that 4 times in a race. That's just, hard racing versus a bit too over the edge. That's just way insane compared to what happened when Grosjean almost took out half the grid and killed Alonso in Belgium 2012 with that ridiculous start. As an example.
I remember when Bottas in Mugello,
mm-hmm.
everyone was so cramped that they just went into the back of each other. I was surprised he never got a penalty for that.
That wasn't Bottas's fault, to be honest, Stephen. And the simple reason for that was because Bottas is the lead car and he is allowed to dictate the pace. He's not going forward, stop, forward, stop, forward, stop. He was just going slow. The guys in the midfield and at the back were anticipating that start and it never came. And then they just concertinaed into each other. So it was more about clarity on the expected standards of the drivers in the pack. I think Bottas didn't really change his speed. If Bottas went fast and slow to try and wind everybody up, then of course that was an issue, but he didn't do that. Similar to what Verstappen's been doing. He's been keeping it slow to kind of mitigate the amount of time that drivers behind him have to slipstream and overtake, which is perfectly fine. But the guys behind have to be calm and not try to anticipate when the leader's going to go as best they can, because that's what causes the accidents. But no, back on the super license thing, just to finish the point I was making, Lando got 3 penalty points or something like that. Kimi Räikkönen and Lance Stroll, And bear in mind, guys, when I talk about driving standards you expect on the road that you would drive in your cars, etc. today, Raikkonen and Lance Stroll both sped in the pit lane in Austria over the course of this weekend. And neither of them got any penalty points at all for speeding in the pit lane. Raikkonen got a $900 fine.
Like two years ago.
But Raikkonen got exactly. Raikkonen got a $900 fine for speeding in the pit lane, but no penalty points. You'd get points on your license if you were caught speeding on the road. So why is speeding, especially in a crowded area like the pit lane, less dangerous than what was happening between Lando and Perez? It isn't. Bottas trying to do Tokyo Drift in the pit lane, that got no penalty points as well. He was just,
he nearly took out half the McLaren grid.
Exactly. Yuki Tsunoda, I think another example, got two separate penalty points for slightly going over the white line on the entry to the pit lane, which again is insane. So the overall system does need review. Michael Massey, the race director, has already said, look, he was quite bullish in this, and I wasn't really a fan of his over this comment. Where he said, the teams had a chance to review these penalty point system early in the season. They chose not to, so we're going to keep going. He's now changed his stance on it. He said, look, this will be subject to review and we'll look at it. But I just think, look, there's a lot of stuff that needs review, and we know that it's going to come up on days like we saw at Austria where people are just having a moan about it and they get on with it. But, I think when you look at what happened this weekend, I think it was like 10 incidents where we got penalty points, and Vettel's one as well in qualifying when it wasn't his fault and he got that grid penalty. Why did Sainz and Bottas not get penalty points for their part in that? Because it was more their fault than anybody else's. So it does need serious review more than anything else, this penalty point system, because the last thing you want is, say, Lando or anyone else getting penalty points for what Lando did and missing a race when it's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I mean, I remember saying to my mum, not last year, I think the year before, when I said, do you know what? It got to about April or May, and my mum had to start giving me lifts to the hospital, right? So I said to her, she said, do you know what? It's funny. He said that I've not been nicked for speeding this year. She went, that's because you haven't been fucking driving this year. I said that's not beside the point, right? It does because I mentioned because I caught, like sometimes where you're being safe and you're doing 30 and you lose concentration and the speed goes up and you get caught. So I kind of saw what happened to me. So I end up taking a course again, that out of the way, right? And then obviously they told me I couldn't drive, and then it got to about April, May, and I was like, I ain't been nicked. Do you know what? It's my mum's, because I think my mum was worried about getting nicked the other day, because we were talking about it, because all the coppers were trying to enforce the lockdown measures and everything, so there's no sort of cameras on the road or anything. And I was like, well, I haven't been nicked this year. It's because you ain't drive this year. I haven't been able to drive my car, so I said that doesn't matter. Still good, isn't it? But yeah, I don't get this whole point of, because they're trying to do it like the road. It's a bit, but people don't race on the road. If you're racing on the road, you shouldn't be driving.
No, of course not. But as I said, when they're using that as the template, and then drivers are getting penalty points for forcing someone off the road a little bit in that sort of situation, against drivers that aren't being penalised for speeding. I know in F1 speeding, you'd think, oh, that's not such a bad thing. But if that's your template and you're not, following that template by those examples, then it's a flawed system.
Someone comes out the pits and then speeding the pit lane and the wheel comes off. What happens?
Well, of course.
We've already seen a wheel come off in the pit lane at 50 miles an hour, and it hit a cameraman in, I think it was 2010. I think it was a Mercedes, actually, where it came off at Rosberg and it smacked into a cameraman. So it can happen to anyone. And it's there, especially also if you're coming into the box and you're doing over 100 miles an hour and you're coming into the box and you lock up, you're going to take out half the mechanics, right? And half the mechanics are going to get killed. So it's like the unsafe release I get a real bugbear with the unsafe release, because you got the lane where it all says their names and everything like that, and then you've got the outside fast lane. But for some reason, people have been relaxed about the rule because they're managing to come out in this lane where all the names are. And I'm like, no, that's to separate the garage from the fast lane, to give them a safety net. So when you see someone and they're doing multiple pit stops, say, I think I saw one with Verstappen. I remember the 2019 British Grand Prix. I saw Verstappen pit, and obviously Lando or Sainz was coming in the pits from McLaren, and the McLaren boys were out, and you already seen Max Verstappen in Monaco hit Bottas into a wall and get a 5-second penalty, but then he comes out alongside Leclerc out of the pit stop, right? The Red Bull guys are all fist pumping, and I'm like, you've just nearly taken out the mechanics because he's had to squeeze himself into the middle lane, and the actual mechanics have had to get out the way. And I'm like, you're not giving a penalty for that. What? You're putting the mechanics at risk. That's not what the lane's for. So that, I feel for that, it needs to be more. You need to have a more. I don't know. Where do you feel the driver? I don't think even the driver should be punished. I think it's more the teams to be punished, right? Because you see, like how Max got a 5-second penalty in Monaco, and all of a sudden, like his race is ruined because he's going to finish 3rd or 4th, right? When actually it's the team that released the car. He's not going to be able to see the car down the fast lane. It's the team that's releasing him by letting the green button go.
Yeah, but the only issue I have with that, though, Stephen, is that a fine like that probably wouldn't be a penalty they'd worry about too much if it buys them an extra little few attempts here or there that gets them out ahead of someone. So you start running the risk of teams really pushing the boundaries with that penalty in mind that they're not going to take seriously. Whereas if you offer penalties during the race to the driver, as harsh as they are, because it's not the driver's fault, the teams are going to think twice about putting someone in a situation where it could potentially cost them 5 seconds, which, as you said, in that race in Monaco, could have been the difference between winning and losing. Of course, it didn't matter because Lewis still won that race anyway, but, that's just how it goes.
Yeah. I'll just quickly bring one more thing up, because Leclerc was confirmed of driving the early version in the simulator of next year's car, and he said of the early things, he said he was hugely different to anything they've experienced before. He said it's still very early days, but the new concept is very, very different. Very different. He said, then I think it's a question mark for everyone whether we are developing well or not. As I was saying, it's such a different project. It's very, very early days, and nobody knows where they're positioning ourselves compared to the others, but we are working on it. It just really feels like what's going to happen. Like, is Hamilton going to be at the front? Is he going to be in the midfield? Is he going to win the race next year? Because you don't know who everyone is in terms of teams next year. So it's a real conundrum next season.
Well, the truth is we don't. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens, who's got it right and who will have work to do.
Absolutely. And they have to get it right, because they some parts of it, they could end up stuck with it for 3 years.
Could do.
So they've got to get it right. So, but yeah, we're going to finish it up there. It's a pleasure having you on again, mate. Right, long time no see. And right, whenever you want to come on, football, F1, name it, you can come on, mate. You're more than welcome. Sunday, what are you saying?
Oh, Sunday. Well, I mean, I'm an Englishman. Of course, it's coming home, isn't it? It's going to be a good.
Arsenal fans, we've got to say we're champions of Europe, so it's got to come.
Well, Bukayo Saka lifts the European trophy. Oh, absolutely. We're going to be running
out £100 million Man United Sancho out of the team, isn't he? So,
well, I mean, tribalism aside, it's been a great tournament for England.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic watching it. hopefully I'd say hopefully the game's not going to be as nerve. It's going to be even more so than it was on Wednesday night. But it's going to be a great game. The two best teams in the tournament, England and Italy, both of them have been fantastic in their own way. And they have been vulnerable as well to a degree. So it is going to provide hopefully an exciting match. But hopefully at the end of it, it's going to be England that's going to be lifting the trophy after all these years. Rather than the Azzurri. Of course, if there are followers tuning in from around the world that aren't necessarily partisan to England, well, sorry guys, it's coming home.
Scotland.
I've got to be confident.
Yeah. Score prediction. Go for it.
I'm going to be cliche. I'm just going to go 2-1 England.
Okay, the same as me. 2-1 England. After extra time.
No, I think England are going to win it in 90 minutes. I think. Extra time is always fun, but I just don't think
it's not fun.
No,
for watching someone else.
Yeah, for the neutrals it is. No, as much as I feel that Italy are going to be a tough team to break down, I think that this is going to be a game where both teams will be able to have a bit more freedom on the ball than the Denmark game, for particular. They pressed really well. There was a lot of energy in that side, at least for the first hour before they were all knackered.
I don't want to watch our highlights video. Me and my bro who does all the overlays talk, man. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with overlays or anything like that, get in touch with him. But him and me were going mad. I was like with the referee, he's fucking right? And he said if he don't overturn this penalty, I'm gonna kill someone. I want to kill someone. I'm about to swear off I'm about to be moved from our council because I'm swearing my mouth off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. It was mad. That game was mad. Oh.
But I'm looking forward to it. I really, really hope we can get it done. But as I said, even if we don't, as disappointed as it will be, I think we can reflect on this tournament being a massive success for the England team. Everyone has done a fantastic
job. For the World Cup as well.
Absolutely. And I think we're there now. I think we have to believe that we can, go on to bigger and better things. I think this is going to be an exciting decade for English football. I really do believe in these young players, and there's going to be more to come waiting in the wings. Some of the players that didn't get called up, so much great talent coming through. So, we have to be excited for it as England fans. And I think the group collectively has been fantastic. The camaraderie has been one of the highlights for it. And it's brought joy to the nation after such a difficult period for the last year and a half with COVID and everything else. Of course, the whole world is experiencing their own story with COVID. Yeah. But, when all is said and done, if Harry Kane lifts the Euro 2020 trophy for England, our first trophy since the World Cup, and of course his first trophy, of course, no doubt. But it will just be a beautiful moment for the country. Hopefully it happens. We'll have to wait and see.
Big up Maisie. She's trying to learn the sport as she's going along. So
I appreciate. Thank you, Maisie. Hope you enjoy
Maisie, go and check out his podcast. There's him and Courtney do a lovely job, and no doubt you'll probably see me there at some point later on in the season. Whenever I will always offer my services to you. Like, you're a great friend and great help for this channel. So, did you pre-order the game as well?
Sorry?
Did you pre-order the game as well?
Oh, what, F1 2020? Of course, Stephen.
Look, it looks good, doesn't it? It looks good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. I've stayed away from watching some of the bigger YouTubers that get it early. That basically play through the entire game most to the point where there's no interest for you to play it.
Chapters of that new story. Let's just put it that way.
I've pretty much avoided that because I want to experience it myself. I know it's cool, and I know EA want to do it, and Codemasters, because they want the big YouTubers to get to their audiences so that they'll go out and buy the game themselves, etc. That's all fine and well, but for me, I'm always going to get the game, so I don't really want to be spoiled on that sort of thing. And they've worked really hard for it, so why would I want a YouTuber to spoil it all for me when I can go and do it myself? So it'll be fun.
Definitely. But you'll probably see me doing a gaming podcast or something. But but yeah, it's something to pass the time. But thanks for coming on. Definitely go check him out. Definitely go hit the like button, the subscribe button. I put his latest video on our community post as well. Make sure to hit the like button here as well, and subscribe and join the membership as well. And yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back next Friday. We'll be back with the Chequered flag show next Friday as usual at 6 p.m. And we'll let you know if Adam can come back on or not. It's whenever you're free, mate. But yeah, and then we've got F1 drivers markets later on tonight. So talking about like this seat with Bottas and other little things that have been going on in the drivers market. There's a lovely little bit of news. So, but until then, make sure to stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.